Hi everybody and welcome to the Millennial Revolt. Today we are going to be talking about President Trump's trip abroad to Saudi Arabia. We're going to be talking about the largest arms deal in history that he made. We're also going to be talking about his terrorism speech that he gave at the Islamic American Summit. So there's so much to talk about, so much to get into, so let's just jump right into it. So this was President Trump's first trip abroad as President of the United States, and in his first stop, he stopped at Saudi Arabia. And in doing so, he signed one of the largest arms deals in U.S. history, with Saudi Arabia worth $350 billion. Now, given the fact that Saudi Arabia has a very colored record with terrorism, I do not think this is smart. I do not think this is wise. I think this was a terrible idea, and I think it's going to have a lot of blowback either for this administration or future administrations, because you can't keep claiming to fight terrorism by supplying one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world. It doesn't work like that. So let's talk about what's in this deal and what did President Trump sign. Now, the deal will provide Saudi Arabia, the world's largest importer of weapons, with top-tier equipment and services including missiles, bombs, armored personnel carriers, littoral combat ships, THAAD missile defense systems, and munition. Now, the package is supposed to demonstrate in the clearest terms possible that the United States is committed to its partnership with Saudi Arabia and its other Gulf allies, while also expanding opportunities for American companies in the region, mostly expanding the American military-industrial complex. Now, the White House released a statement saying that the package of defense equipment and services support the long-term security of the Saudi Arabia and Gulf region in face of quote-unquote Iranian threats, while also boosting the kingdom's ability to contribute to quote-unquote counterterrorism operations across the region. President Trump, along with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, is supposed to sign a memorandum of intent on the package deal. The $350 billion deal will take effect slowly over 10 years. It will be stretched out, but over $110 billion will take effect immediately. Now, according to Gary Cohn, President Trump's chief economic advisor, he said that Saudi Arabia is going to hire American companies as a result of the defense deal. Now, he said that the goal of the deal is to invest a lot of money in the U.S. and have a lot of U.S. companies invest and build things in Saudi Arabia. Now, the vast funds, which will boost the U.S. defense sector, will be spent to address Saudi Arabia's defense needs while scaling back U.S. military involvement in specific operations. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman began negotiations on the deal shortly after the 2016 U.S. presidential election, when he sent a delegation to Trump Tower to meet with the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is serving as a senior advisor to President Trump. So we had Jared Kushner and the Saudi Crown Prince negotiating billions of dollar arms deals just after President Trump was elected, and now we're supposed to believe that Saudi Arabia is going to hire U.S. companies as a result of this deal, and somewhere in all of these people's magical minds that none of these weapons will in turn fall into the hands of armed groups who the Saudis support, which in turn they could come around and attack the United States. Like, we haven't seen this happen before. I see so many people justifying President Trump making this deal with Saudi Arabia, saying that he is a businessman. While I want people to be ideologically consistent. If Hillary Clinton had won the presidency and she had made this deal with Saudi Arabia, one of the largest arms deals in U.S. history, funding a known state sponsor of terrorism, the biggest in the world, whose ideology has spread across Europe, across Africa, across the Middle East. It is the main ideology, the Wahhabist, Salafist ideology that most of these terror groups are using. If she had made that deal, people would be saying it's unconscionable. They would be saying that how could Hillary Clinton make a deal like that? She is endangering the lives lives of Americans. She is endangering the lives of our troops. She is endangering the lives of our allies by making a deal with a country who is known for supporting terrorist groups worldwide, whose nationals attacked us on 9/11. How can she make a deal like that? But in the same breath, I see people justify this by saying, well, President Trump is a businessman. He's doing this for the American people. MAGA, this is a win for us. I mean, it's truly ridiculous. It's truly just unbelievable how people can try to play these mind games with themselves and say that this is going to be a win for us. No, it's not. It's either going to affect the Trump administration because he has 4 years. If he wins a second term, then that's 8 years of the presidency. It's either going to affect him or it's going to affect future administrations. Why would we want to put ourselves in the position where the weapons that we sell to Saudi Arabia could fall into the hands of terrorist groups or they could be used to attack our country? That doesn't make sense. What is the benefit out of this? I see long term is nothing but problems for us down the line that we're going to have to continue to deal with because administrations on the left and the right continue to do this. You arm a terrorist state and then in the same breath claim that you're fighting terrorism and claim that you're trying to create a world of peace. It doesn't make sense. The fact that our president just signed a memorandum to give billions of dollars of American-made weapons to a nation who is funding radical mosques all around Europe, Africa, the Middle East, who is currently bombing one of the poorest nations in the Middle East, Yemen, engaging in a blockade, starving their people, starving their children, and people can continue to say that this is a win for the United States. There's something seriously sick about that mentality to think that we are gaining something about this, that our country is on some moral high ground because President Trump just made a billion-dollar arm deal with a terror state. Other military hardware included in this deal is a software system, a package of satellite capabilities, as well as fighting and artillery vehicles are also reportedly part of the negotiations. More than $1 billion worth of munitions, including armor-piercing penetrator warheads and paveway laser-guided bombs made by Raytheon, might also be included in this package. International human rights groups have been voicing their concern over the Saudi-led coalition which is currently engaging in an illegal war against Yemen. Riyadh is fighting against Houthi rebels and supporters of the former Yemeni president Ali Abdul Saleh, who was allegedly backed by Iran. Human Rights Watch has said that the Saudi-led coalition has engaged in war crimes targeting hospitals, markets, schools, and religious centers. In former President Obama's last month of office, he halted a precision-guided munitions to Saudi Arabia over concerns that the Royal Saudi Air Force was targeting Yemeni civilians. So that's what President Trump did as far as the arms deal that he signed, but what he also did while he was abroad was he spoke at the Saudi-organized Arab Islamic American Summit in Riyadh. He spoke in front of leaders of most Muslim-majority countries in the world, and only 2 nations were not there, which are mostly Muslim-majority nations, Syria and Iran. Now, during President Trump's speech, one of the main themes that he spoke about was self-reliance of Arab nations and the wider Muslim world in general, basically calling on them to fight terrorism and them to be dependent nations and stop relying on the US to fight its battles. Now, I completely agree with this 100%. Every nation has the right to defend themselves, and the US shouldn't be the world's policeman. I feel that the men and women in each particular nation, if you don't fight for your country's freedom, for its rights, for its survival, then you have no right to complain whatever happens to it. And I think this applies for anyone around the world. Now, President Trump also went on to condemn terrorism, and he condemned Iran as a country which is fomenting terrorism, which is enabling terrorism, and which is financing terrorism worldwide. But all of this is untrue. You can look at the data, you can look at any of this. We know for a fact that Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabist ideology which Saudi Arabia exports, is responsible for most of the terror worldwide. This is not to say that Iran isn't supporting rebel groups worldwide. I'm not saying that. But as a world sponsor of terror, we know that it's Saudi Arabia. Now, President Trump was basically making bombastic statements against Iran in the speech. He was even implying military actions against them and spoke of the need to quote unquote isolate Iran. Now, as far as this goes, Iran is nowhere near isolated. European governments are going to begin to invest in this country, as well as Russia and China. I think with the US continuing to make these sorts of statements, whether it's a conservative administration or a liberal administration, it doesn't matter. It just shows how out of touch with reality they are as far as terrorism and Iran and the things that are happening around the world. Now, Iran is in compliance with the nuclear agreement. Whether conservatives would like to believe this or not, it is actually true they are. As far as them launching ballistic missiles, as I previously said, every country has the right to defend themselves. Every country has the right to defend its people. We should not expect our allies to test fire missiles and hold military drills and expect that any other country is going to sit back and wait for the United States and or our allies to invade them. That doesn't make any sense. That is illogical. No leadership of any country would continue to be in power if they didn't think about their country's defense and the people living within their country. Now, what this shows to me is American government's refusal to recognize the fact that Saudi Arabia is a problem. And we're either going to confront this problem head on, or we're going to continue to pay lip service to terrorism while funding them in the same breath. And it seems that the Trump administration is going to continue to do what previous administrations on the left and the right have done for decades. Now, also in President Trump's speech, he mentioned Syria in the context of Iran's support of President Bashar al-Assad. Again, Iran, Russia are legally in Syria because they have the permission of the president of a sovereign nation. So it kind of doesn't make sense when President Trump begins to espouse these idiotic claims that Iran shouldn't be helping any other country. It doesn't make sense. Now, most of President Trump's speech was aimed at ISIS or Islamic State, and it was focused on fighting terrorism. But in order to do that, you have to address the ideology. And the ideology that a lot of these terror groups do subscribe to is the Wahhabist Salafist ideology. And Saudi Arabia funds and supports and arms these groups. So it's illogical and completely dishonest of the president to condemn Iran or Syria. And it's completely idiotic to condemn the Lebanese resistant movement, Hezbollah. You can call them a resistant rebel group or you can call them a terrorist group, whichever or you choose. I've heard both. But as of right now, they are currently fighting on the same side as Syria. And Russia and Iran are fighting against Wahhabist terror groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda, both which receive majority of their funds from the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the US's other ally, Qatar. Now, during President Trump's speech, he also talked about commercial opportunities between Muslim majority nations and the US. From the gist of it, what I got was that if Muslim majority nations buy US arms then the money that they use to buy these arms, and it will flow into the United States, and it will be good for the US economy. That's kind of what I got from his speech, besides threatening Iran and selling arms around the world helps the US economy. Now, Iran isn't a threat to world peace. They are a Shia, quote unquote, democratic theocracy. They do have elections, whether you think they are valid or not. I really think that's up to any person who's watching them. But they do have elections, and they are a theocratic government. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear. I do not support theocracy. I do not support religious theocracy, whether it's Islamic, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Christian. I do not think religion has any place within a government. I think anytime you have religion that is enforced by our government and you have to follow particular rules and things like that, you begin to violate people's civil liberties. And I won't support and will never support anything like that. But, that being said, Iran isn't threatening the world as a whole. Saudi Arabia's extremist ideology does threaten the world as a whole. Saudi Arabia supporting terrorist groups, trying to topple Syria's secular government, does threaten the world as a whole. We cannot continue to have countries like Iraq. We cannot continue to have countries like Afghanistan or even Libya, which was one of the richest nations in Africa, which is now having open slave trades thanks to the US support, as well as our European allies in the Gulf nations, which supported the US bombing campaign there. We cannot continue to have these things. So the sham of President Trump's speech about shared secular Arab states like Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, and Algeria, who stood proudly against the imperialism of Gulf barbarity. Donald Trump spoke about America not wanting to lecture the Muslim world nor impose his views upon it. This particular remark should be applauded. But President Trump stopped short of following his own advice. He proceeded to lecture Muslim leaders about the dangers of Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah. Three organizations, unlike the United States and Saudi Arabia, which are actually fighting terrorism, which we help support, and our allies help support. The amount of circles I see too many people who are acting like sycophants doing to justify President Trump flip-flopping on his stance on Saudi Arabia. Just look at his previous tweets, things that he has said. I understand that it is different when you are in a position of power and you are leading our country. But you do not need to make billions of dollars of arms deals. You do not need to support a nation which is financing terror around the world. You do not need to do what multiple administrations on the left and the right has done. Put on a pretty face, take their asses to Saudi Arabia when we know that they are the biggest sponsors of terrorism in the world, and then claim, with the help of our quote-unquote allies in the Gulf region, that we're going to be fighting terrorism with the same people who are funding it. It makes no sense. I don't understand the logic behind this, and conservatives who can dress this up and try to paint this as a pretty picture would be up in arms if liberals and Democratic politicians do the same thing. Democrats and Republicans do the same thing when each of them are in power, and the illogical inconsistencies that so many people have over this trip just shows that people don't stand by principle. They only support the politician that they like who is in power, and they don't stand by things that they actually believe. That it has shown me that too many people are sycophants. Too many people are willing to support anything that their favorite politician does, regardless if it clashes with their own political beliefs. This trip has shown that President Trump is following in the footsteps of former President Obama, as well as Hillary Clinton, as well as former President George Bush, by continuing to sell millions of dollars to unstable, theocratic regimes, both parties, whether it is Democrats who are in power or Republicans who are in power, they are the same. There is no difference between them. They will continue to betray the American people to their military-industrial masters. I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.